11 o'clock, welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell making his triumphant return to the studio. Hopefully feeling better. It is cold in here, so hopefully you're not already cold. But happy to have you back. Halfway through the week, making our way through camp. Almost full weekend, 24 days to kick off. Things are good.
Countdown is on, ready for some ball. Hearing from some players, scrimmage on deck. Yeah, it's here. Hopefully we can get some of this weather out of here.
Ugh.
But yeah, glad to be back in the studio.
Yesterday, as he does every single year, Bruce Feldman of The Athletic once again dropped his freaks of college football list.
Freaks.
And for the first time ever, we have a back-to-back number one. Nick Harbor, once again, making his way to the top of the list, like last year, as the number one freak in college football.
Did y'all talk about this yesterday?
Not yesterday. Waiting for you.
Saved it for you.
Saved it for you.
It's very kind of you. So, you also have another Gamecock on the list.
Another Nick. Top 11.
I believe we talked about this last year when we said that Nick Eamon-Worry should have been on the list then as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a feeling somebody maybe, because he does research, you can tell that he researches this list.
Mm-hmm.
And like some of the details he provides are only available in-house.
Sure.
So he does quite a bit of research for this thing. I got a feeling somebody at South Carolina, maybe even Shane Beamer himself, while he was researching this one, was like, hey, there's this other guy here, Nick Eamon-Worry, who also should be on your freaks list. And because he went from not being on it to being number 11.
Right.
So seems like that's almost admitting there was a miss last year.
Right. And for those that aren't familiar, yes, he does look like what you're doing on the field, but also it's some of the things off the field with Nick Harbor, obviously his ability with speed and track and stuff like that. What he referenced with Nick Eamon-Worry, broad jump 11.4, vertical jump 42 inches, 24 reps of 225 on the bench, and squatted 565 pounds. Now, for reference, this morning when I was on with Preston, he said when he was here, he did 27 reps of 225. So, again, he's a defensive lineman. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, a defensive back doing that is definitely freak material.
Yeah, and I think, so Freaks List, it's been around for a long time, like 20 years now. And yes, it can involve production on the field, but I think of it more being just like your athleticism, like your feats are kind of off the charts. And so you can go back 2013, going into that season, Jadeveon Clowney, let's see, where was he? He was number one, which is what I assumed. It's what he should have been, and he was. So, you know, it's basically just like it is the list of everybody in the country, you hope, that you would just say is built different. Like, that guy is built different. And so I think here locally and nationally, everybody's kind of had Harbor in that category since, he was like a junior in high school. I mean, the fact that he is, you look at what he does on the track, and he's doing it against guys that are a good bit smaller than him, and he's still hanging, with some of the fastest guys in the country. I think you look at Nick Eamon-Worry, maybe not as nationally known, but you certainly look all the way back to when, he probably came close to some of those measurables at that camp for South Carolina going into his senior year of high school.
Yeah, that was the thing that really stood out about Nick E. coming out of high school. I still remember, standing on the sidelines, and you're sitting there, and he jumps out of the. I was going to say jumps out of the gym. That's a basketball reference. He skies to get an interception, and then you saw the size with your own eyes. You saw the times that he was able to run in the 40. I remember watching him run back in high school, and Nicky's high school coach, Aaron Brand, up at Irmo, I remembered him telling me one time, like, nobody's going to out-jump Nick. So it was a surprise, honestly, that he has not been on this list, particularly when you combined it with the fact that he's not an unknown commodity. Nick Harbor is not unknown either, but he hasn't played as much. He's played 1 year of college football. he played a good many snaps, but it's not like he went out and caught 50 balls last year, started a whole bunch of games, etc. Nicky's a guy that has played, for a couple years now. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and had a big freshman year too. I think it makes a lot of sense that he got put on this list now.
And one thing that really sticks out to me about Nicky, and we've had him in here, and you guys have obviously been around him plenty of times, when you look at him physically, he does not look like your typical defensive back. He's obviously taller, and from a physical standpoint, again, repping 24 sets of 225 on the bench, he's not like, bulging muscular, but again, that strength is something that, is kind of proportioned differently when you're that tall. And again, we've obviously seen what he's been able to do on the field. We're expecting him to have another great year this year where he could be on his way to the NFL at the end of this year if things obviously go right. So, a well-deserved spot on the Freaks list that, again, was probably an omission from him last year being on the list.
Yeah, a couple of other guys Carolina fans are familiar with. Got Jordan Birch on there for the second straight, maybe third straight year. I know he's been on there before. He was definitely on there last year, and fits the bill. This is a guy that can run. I mean, GPS I think has had him in the 21s or 22s, maybe even at some point in terms of his speed. And then Jade McGowan, by the way, Boston College wide receiver from Lawrence, smaller guy but incredibly fast and actually incredibly strong. Apparently, from some of his weight room numbers there, was obviously committed to South Carolina briefly as a transfer, but ended up at Boston College and is like 98, I think, on the list. So maybe a few other guys, if you're really a Gamecock like recruitnik, that you'll go through and recognize.
Yeah.
Abdul Carter, who was a Gamecock linebacker target. I think he's playing kind of edge now at Penn State. James Pierce, obviously a stud. He's on there, top 15. I was trying to think, guys, and maybe we open this up to the Firehouse Subs text line as well, 446-100. You can't say the two Knicks. If you were doing, and this may be an article on Gamecock Central at some point, so I'm just going to outsource this to everyone. If you're doing the Freaks list, the South Carolina version, the local version, we already know you got Harbor and Imawari on there. Who else has to be on there?
It's a good question.
Who has to be on the Gamecock version of the Freaks list for this season? There's actually way more potential guys for that than you may think off the hoof. Like, I think they're kind of, there's some freaky athletes on this team.
Yeah. Rocket qualify, you think? Maybe be in the conversation there?
I think he has to qualify.
And, he was an athlete coming out of high school, much like what Nick Harbor was. I thought it was funny yesterday, and we'll get to some of the cuts from him in a minute, that, he said when he arrived at Arkansas, they were like, hey, play running back? Sure. And obviously the rest is history. So I think he's a good candidate for that.
I got one. Demetrius Knight.
Yeah.
I think that's one. Because you go back and look, and like if you look at his bio on Gamecocks Online, it's hilarious because it's like, yeah, he ran for a 99-yard touchdown as a quarterback in high school, and he played, 5 different positions. And then, you just hear people around the program talk about him and how fast he is. I can't remember off the top of my head his max speed in terms of miles per hour, but it's way up there, especially for a guy who's, what is he even listed at? He's a big old linebacker. He's 6'2", 245, and he's out there running wide receiver-esque 40 times. I think with all that, he's probably a guy that would qualify, be pretty high up there on the Gamecock version of that list.
Yeah, I think you look at what Rocket did as, I guess, the 2 seasons ago at Arkansas. I think some freaky movement ability for a big guy. He definitely qualifies. I think Knight, like Chris said, his speed at that size was something South Carolina kind of honed in on when they decided to recruit him. I think you actually have multiple candidates in the linebacker room. Like I don't know if Bam Martin Scott gets enough credit for just how good of an athlete he is. I think J.R. Johnson, once people realize that name as well, like all those guys time similarly from what I've heard. And so, I think that was a position where for us even to have the conversation of, hey, should this guy be on a top 10 list of the most athletic guys? That really wasn't always the case for Carolina's linebacking core. Like, that's not a spot where they've had those sort of somewhat upper echelon traits. Like they've had some good linebackers, but it just traits-wise and athletic-wise wasn't always the case. I think you'd probably make a case for Dylan Stewart based on everything we've heard about him. I think you'd make a case potentially for Josiah Thompson. I mean, this is a freshman who is 6'7", closing in on 300 pounds, probably 295 or so now, has effortless movement ability, is future left tackle here, and maybe the current left tackle here as a true freshman. So I think you throw him into the mix. I think as you kind of expand on the roster, some guys that haven't played as much but would be in the conversation. I think Vakari Swain would be in this conversation. I mean, I've watched this guy, just the movement ability, the ability to leap, ability to make difficult movements look easy. Vakari is a guy you're kind of waiting to see it all translate into SEC college football player at cornerback. But just, again, Freaks List is more about the pure athleticism. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a case to be made for Vakari. And, I imagine there's a guy on this team that even as closely as we follow it, particularly from, like, the strength standpoint, because we don't often get this guy benched this guy squatted that. Who's the Javon Gwynn of this group? Remember how Javon Gwynn was just, like, I don't think if you told me back then who would be on the Freaks List, until some stuff started to kind of leak out about just how strong Javon was, I probably would not have had him on a list like this. But once you learn, like, this guy, Byron Gerardo, like, these are guys who were two of, like, the strongest guys in South Carolina football history, I think, in terms of weight room numbers. So is there a guy or two on here otherwise on the O-line or D-line that maybe gets into the mix? I mean, Taka Hemingway is a guy who both from a sort of trait standpoint, but also just, I mean, this is a big guy, obviously, a big man who, you go back to high school, he excelled in football, basketball, baseball, sort of was a guy that just did it all and did it all at a high level. So I think Taka, also a guy who on a lot of those basketball teams that we asked the guys to put together, Taka ends up popping up on them. So I think it's kind of an intriguing question.
Yeah, there's always some, like you said, Wes, there's a guy or two. Sedarius Hutcherson, remember, it was on there for 2 years. He was a 230-pound tight end when he got to Carolina and ended up with a 31.5-inch vertical and squatted 650 pounds. And until that came out, you're like, oh, I didn't really know that. You know, so always some kind of hidden gems from that standpoint.
Yeah, let us know who you think the South Carolina Freaks would be on your list, 803-446-100. Hit some of those on the Firehouse Subs text line a little bit later on in the show. But we did get to hear from some players yesterday in speaking to the media as camp rolls on. Let's hear some of that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Had a chance to catch up last week here in studio with my guy, Mac Sawyer. And you can catch up with Mac and Joe as well, particularly if you have issues with your roof. Call them today, 803-590-7870. Or head on over to classicroofingsc.com. As I keep telling you on there, you can get information about their services and you can get a free estimate about your roof and get an idea of maybe there's some things you need to do to extend the life of that roof. Obviously, some storms in the area here lately, and if those storms have affected your roof, you may need to file an insurance claim or you may not. You're going to want an expert opinion on that before you just blindly do that. Some people may tell you, hey, just file a claim, but long term, you only want to do that if you really need to. Let them come out, give you an honest assessment like they did for me. Phone number 803-590-7870. Again, that's our friends at Classic Roofing at classicroofingsc.com.
I wouldn't say it was too much on my shoulder. You know, it was, of course, it was my shoulder, but, you know, when it came down to me and with Chip, he showed me the way to where take preparation, you know, and just, you know, take one day at a time. Because when I first got in here and I got in with Chip, it was just like I was just ready to go, you know what I mean, and just taking everything fast. And I feel like that was, with being with Chip, it was like a lot of patient stuff, you know what I mean, and just not just working on my shoulder, but working on my mobility of everything as like my hips, my knees and everything. And I feel like that was the main thing. It wasn't just not just the shoulder, you know what I mean?
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell. Chris Clark along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. That was Rocket Sanders yesterday talking to the media about the summer rehab that he's been going through. Of course, suffering the injury last year at Arkansas that kept him on the sidelines for most of the season, working to get back to 100% health so he can be hopefully that 2022 version of Rocket Sanders for the Gamecocks when we do take the field here in a couple weeks. And from everything we've heard from him as well as all the coaches, his recovery has gone according to plan so far, even better than it seems like they were hoping for to this point.
Yeah, and he was referencing Chip Morton there, who is one of really Luke Day, the head of the strength and conditioning program here at South Carolina. Is his right-hand man, really, and Chip Morton has, a lot of experience, NFL experience. He's somebody who has, I would say compared to a lot of assistant strength and conditioning coaches, he kind of has an outsized role, a big role, and has a lot of trust, I think, in that weight room and in the building from Shane Beamer. And so, you heard how much Rocket talked about him. And the interesting thing about Rocket is, like, everybody knew when he got here his talent level, right? But the biggest question I think people had was, well, what happened in 2023? He had at least a couple of different injuries he was dealing with, the knee, the shoulder. Rocket referenced the shoulder there in that soundbite. And so when could he be healthy? Would he be able to return to the 2022 form? And all the indications have been that, yes, he has. And a couple things to remember, in addition to Chip Morton and working with Luke Day, he has his old strength coach from Arkansas back in Jamil Walker. They have a very close relationship. Jamil was there in 2022 during Rocket's big year and now is an assistant here at South Carolina. So that's the part that had to come together first, and all the returns have been really, really good.
So for those who don't know Jamil Walker, he would be on the strength coach freaks list, I think.
Oh, man.
Just an impressive athlete if you've seen him out there. And one of those guys that, you can tell he puts his money where his mouth is in terms of being in the gym and working out. And, I think anytime you're talking about a running back and the injuries do stack up, which they kind of did last year, I don't know if this is I don't think you would say it was like a recurring problem with Rocket, but certainly the injuries stacked up last season. And, there are naturally going to be some questions like, hey, can this guy get back to where he was? I think he'll really start to feel it like as the pads are now going on and stuff like that. And I think if you're South Carolina, you still ease him in a little bit, I would imagine. I think you got to be careful. I think that's where, frankly, playing in Old Dominion to start out lets you ease a guy in a little bit like that as far as going into a game and kind of getting hit for the first time in a while. He'll scrimmage, I'm sure, but I'll be very curious to see what the rep split is for Rocket as someone who has played the game. Like, this is a guy who,
sure,
he's not a newcomer in any way to the SEC. It's not even like he's one of those transfers where you're going, oh, he's played, but it was at another conference.
Yeah.
This guy knows SEC ball. So I do think you got to be kind of deliberate and smart with how you bring him along.
And I think that's smart, point that you bring up there, that playing a team like Old Dominion, you don't need him to go out there and run for 150 yards. Maybe you get him 6, 8, 10 carries, get his feet wet a little bit. Like I said, let him get used to contact again before you go on the road and play a very important game in week number 2 against Kentucky. And that will also provide the opportunity in that first week to get all these other running backs out there, see what Oscar Attaway is going to be, see what Jordan Howell is going to be, as well as many others, and kind of feel what that room's going to be behind Rocket Sanders, was assuming he's going to be able to stay healthy the entire season.
I thought it was interesting listening to Marquell Blackwell talk on USC Media Day, and it sounded like all the assistant coaches, or certainly at least multiple assistant coaches, had kind of just met with their guys. And, talking to Fury, he had just met with his wide receivers, kind of that final message before camp starts. And Blackwell had just met with his guys. And, his message was basically, look, guys, there's a limit to the travel roster. And look around.
That's a great point.
Like, look around. Y'all, the players know.
Sure.
In terms of like talent, players know where. Oh, I might be a little bit better than the rest of this room. Or the players can look around and be like, man, it's a pretty loaded room. Like, there's talent in this room. And so, his point was, if you want to travel, and I guess there probably won't really be any limitations for an out-of-conference home game, game one, but there will maybe even be some decisions in game two in terms of who gets on that plane to Kentucky based on what happens in game one. And now part of Blackwell's message was essentially, if you're on the fringe of the rotation, but you want a jersey, you want to be on the bus or on the plane, special teams is your ticket on the train. So, you know, I think you look at this running back room, and I know we're getting a little bit away from Rocket, but you look at that room, I think on paper, we all sort of probably feel pretty comfortable saying, oh, Rocket is first based on experience. Attaway is probably second. I've sort of slotted Jordan Howell as third, you know, but I think once you start to get there, do you look at, well, hey, let's not forget about what Juju's done in his career. Are we all forgetting DJ Braswell and what he could be capable of? Matt Fuller is someone they're very high on. So maybe it starts to become a conversation, but I think in terms of getting past what we think it is on paper and getting into those actual decisions, what does this running back rotation look like? How big is the drop-off from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, and how does that affect the split? Is it like you have a 1 and a 2, and then that third guy is kind of just, I don't know, out there for 10% of the snaps or something like that? Or is it a little bit more of an... I always felt like it's hard to play three guys. So I think there are like some almost game within the game, some battles within the battles, sort of, I would say, small details we're going to start to maybe get a better feel for as this thing rolls along.
Yeah, the SEC, unless they've changed it again, and maybe changed it in the past few hours, who knows, but the travel roster limit is now 74. It used to be 70. You get 4 extra players. You may say it's kind of, but those extra 4,
it's a big deal.
Pretty significant for you. And so now, will they change that if they go with this new, you know, really you can scholarship 105 players? Are you still going to say, you can only take 74 of them? That's interesting. But right now, even your roster limit is even higher, and
Sure.
It's still 74. I mean, counting walk-ons, I think they have, 119 players overall on the South Carolina football team. So, you know, some of them you can, no offense, relatively easily cut. But when you get into, like you said, Wes, positions like running back, wide receiver, where there's like, I mean, you can look at wide receiver and say, I can see these 10 guys playing, whether it's in the rotation, starting, special teams. I mean, right there with that in the running back room, it's like 15 guys, 16 guys. So, you know, you very quickly start running into numbers issues, and that's where that competition comes in, which is a good thing. It's better than looking at it and saying, I don't know who we're going to be able to throw out there this year. Definitely that's a couple spots. And going back to running back, they have more numbers. They have more competitive depth there this season.
For sure. And we'll take a look at the wide receiver room coming up next. Vangevrius Jacobs, one of the new adds to that room this offseason via the transfer portal. We'll hear what he had to say about the room, being a little bit unselfish as they navigate through who is going to be the main guys in the wide receiver room. Reminder, the ultimate or best Gamecock moment since the year 2000 is live on 107.5 The Game's Twitter page. Go and vote for your favorite moment from the 4 winners we had last week. Paul's going to be running all week long, and we'll crown our ultimate winner on Monday at Columbia Craft, 520 Green Street down in the Vista. Jay's going to be broadcasting live from out there, and we'll talk about that moment, whatever it is, coming up on Monday. More Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs up next on your Monday or Wednesday here on The Game.
Our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating have been serving the Midlands since 1983. So if you have anything that you may need from an HVAC standpoint, make sure you give them a call, 803-672-3224. My guy, Justin Krantz, and his family-owned and operated business can take great care of you because they've been out to my home. They've taken great care of my family. They can give you a free second opinion on coil leaks and compressors. They can do AC repair, installation, preventative maintenance. Join their Krantz Club if you want more information on that. Ductless AC, indoor air quality, and if you have a commercial HVAC need, they can help you with that as well. They serve the entire Midlands. They do financing. They've got plenty of specials going on. So, again, just give them a call, 803-672-3224. That's reliable, family-owned HVAC services from Krantz Cooling and Heating, KrantzCooling.com.
But really, all the receivers, they're hungry. So all of us, we're hungry to make plays and just to watch each other grow and watch each other make plays. So we're unselfish. We got that unselfish mindset. Like, if someone else making plays, you feel me, good job to them. You know, we happy for them. And whenever it's our opportunity, we're going to do our best to make the play too. So like we all just hungry. We all got the same goal, just get better each day.
Well, Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, Tyler Head, West Mitchell. Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday. That was the voice of Vandrevius Jacobs, one of the newer additions to the wide receiver room this offseason, transferring over from Florida State, where he spent his freshman year. And as we've been talking about so much this offseason, this wide receiver room completely wide open. We don't know who the main 3 or 4 guys are going to be when the season starts here in a couple weeks. And Vandrevius Jacobs certainly going to be in the mix for that. But as he said, you know, everybody's supporting everybody doing their best out there, and seeing what happens by the end of fall camp to the main guys are going to be.
Yeah, I kind of like the energy that he has, like the energy he brings. Had a pretty lengthy conversation with him at USC Media Day, and I kind of walked away like, man, I kind of like that kid. Like he has a vibe about him. He basically said in my conversation with him, he's like, I'm here to show what I can do, but it ultimately it's the coach's decision who plays, and I trust the coaches to make the right decision. So I'm just going to go do everything I can to show that I'm the right decision, essentially. And it's like, man, this kid has like a good mindset about it coming in. And my expectations for what to expect from him this year have been steadily shifting from, hey, he's a redshirt freshman, he doesn't necessarily have to compete or kind of be in the rotation, I should say, to maybe, to, okay, like this guy is maybe making a case to be in the rotation from what we have heard. Now, you know, I think it's still ongoing, right? Like, I think we're going to learn a lot from these scrimmages. Who can go make plays? Who can get open and make plays when the ball is in the air? Those, I think, are the 3 guys that are going to go play, and who can consistently kind of run the right routes and be in the right spot and do all the boring things that we don't like to talk about, but coaches love to talk about. And so can Jacobs be one of those guys? I don't think we've answered that yet, but is there going to possibly be a case where he's one of those first 3? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at this point. And that is a little bit of a shift from maybe where I was thinking when he first signed with Carolina.
Yeah, he's got a really interesting skill set, and we knew that coming out of high school he was really talented, and even going back to his short tenure at Florida State, you know, I remember when he committed to South Carolina out of the portal, going back and doing what you do, you go try to research some things, watch his high school tape, see if anything is available from Florida State, see if anything's been said about him, and you know, you could say, it's just coach speak. But Mike Norvell said, hey, we thought out of high school he was one of the best receivers in the country. And, you know, obviously they did a great job at Florida State building up their talent, whether it was high school talent or from the portal. And so that was pretty high praise. And I think the conclusion that some may have jumped to, and I'll put myself in there, is you go, okay, South Carolina signed 5 transfer receivers. They've got some guys coming back. If you look at Jacobs, he's not while he's every bit as talented as those other guys, I think, he hasn't played as much. You know, he hasn't played as much as a Jared Brown, a Gage Larvin, Amari Huggins-Bruce, Delvon Campbell, who's going into his 6th year. But at the end of the day, if he shows in practice that he's the best guy, I mean, he's going to be a guy that plays. So I think his presence and what he's done so far has only complicated for us and probably, heck, even for the coaching staff, who their guys are. You know, so if it ends up being to where it's a close competition and there's 9-10 guys in the mix, great. That's even better.
Well, and it's interesting that Jacobs and Campbell basically came in at the same time, rounding out, you know, this receiver room via the portal, because it's 2 different ends of the spectrum. You have with Jacobs, who, again, is a redshirt freshman who, if he wants to stay around here, can be on your team for a couple more years, can continue to develop and continue to improve as a wide receiver, as opposed to Delvon Campbell, who's coming in here with 1 year trying to prove that he is a guy that has the opportunity to play at the next level, be one of the better receivers in college football and all that kind of stuff. So different dynamic between those 2 guys that are both going to be vying for a spot here in this wide receiver room.
Yeah, and a little bit different skill set as well, I think, between those 2 guys. But certainly, I mean, this room looks completely different than it would have if we were in the era of 10 years ago. You know, you'd be sitting there like, there'd maybe be a grad transfer in there of a guy who, maybe had some issues somewhere else or was at a smaller school, but you'd mostly be counting on a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. And you have really completely reshaped this room. Now, I don't know if we've learned enough about it yet to say this room is going to overachieve versus the outside expectation. I think there are some solid early signs that could be the case. Not ready to say for sure yet, but from what I've heard, yes, they may not be the biggest group. We know that, but there is certainly some speed and quickness among this entire room, I think. And so if you put enough of that on the field, combine it with an effective rushing attack, which is obviously a huge priority for this team to kind of clean up and improve on offense. And maybe we are 3 or 4 games into the season saying, hey, this receiver room has been a lot more.
I think I'm going to steal something that you have pointed out often, and it's like you can go baseline and look at receiver and say, all right, what were they missing last year, and then did they improve those things? You could say on paper, but I mean, really, did you improve those things this offseason? Experience, returning production, speed, quickness, overall numbers. The answer is yes to all of those things, but the question is, how much more did you improve it, and how impactful can that be? When we talk about added depth at receiver or running back or, the front 6 or 7, that don't take that to mean we're saying, okay, they're completely loaded, going to be completely unstoppable this year. We're just pointing out from last year to this year, have you improved some things and gotten better? You have, but you're going to be tested early and often against this schedule. And I think very early we'll kind of see how those things are going. But there have been, in addition to the on-paper improvements you made, I agree with you, Wes, and I've heard the same. There have been some early signs that, okay, maybe this is a group that cannot just be improved as like a default, like a baseline. Maybe they can make some plays and be impactful for this offense.
Absolutely, and we'll see what happens. Again, that was Verjevius Jacobs that we heard from yesterday when talking to the media. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. See who your freaks on this South Carolina team are. Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100. It's coming up next here on the game. It's after the Sports Minute. The read is after the Sports Minute. You got a minute.
Okay, I got you. All right, everyone, let me tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media. Michael, Nathan, and all those guys have been out to our home, They've been out to Wes Mitchell's home. They can come out to your home or business as well. Now, they specialize in smart home installations, which means you can control your lights, your devices, your thermostat, your security and cameras, and all your audiovisual equipment from the touch of a button on your smartphone, whether you're just upstairs and controlling things downstairs, or even if you're completely away on vacation, you can do all those things. But if you need something as simple as mounting a TV, hiding all the ugly wires, making everything look nice and clean, they can do it for you. I saw on their Instagram page, guys, they mounted a TV on a fireplace the other day. That looked really awesome. You can go check out some other examples of their past work and get yourself some inspiration by going to their Facebook or their Instagram accounts. Integrated Media Columbia is how you can do that. Give them a call, 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you for the next couple minutes here before we turn things over to the halftime show with Terry and I believe Mike Gillespie today. We asked the question at the beginning of the show in reference to both Nick Harbor and Nicky Minori making Bruce Feldman's list of freak athletes in college football for the 2024 season. Of course, Nick Harbor being number one 2 years in a row here. There was anybody on just South Carolina's team that you think deserves to make the freaks list. Got a nameless texter weighing in with two names here. He included J.R. Johnson and DJ Braswell.
This guy, did I send that?
That was Wes.
Did I send
Wes,
that in?
Wes sent it. That's why his name was texture.
This guy is speaking my language. Hey, y'all wait. When J.R. Johnson's all SEC in a couple of years, like, Wes
is going to be running around saying, told you.
Yep. Y'all wait. 6'3", what's he listed as? 6'3", 240, 245?
Got
run?
6'4", 240.
See, my man can run.
My goodness.
Can cover, can hit.
Here's his every now and then how there's, talk about this a lot, like the good bio. Rangy, smooth, fast, and extremely talented. Woo. Can rush and cover.
Did I
Has
write
a bright
that?
future. I think so. Like Wes, Steve Finks, like Wes, what do you think?
What do you think of JR?
I need some words about J.R.
Smooth,
Johnson.
fast.
Yeah.
What is it? Phenomenal talent?
Extremely talented. Playmaker. Can rush and cover. Has a bright future. I mean, they checked all the boxes.
The scouting boxes there. Impressive.
And Braswell, too.
Yeah.
Braswell's the one name, I mean, and he got a little bit of playing time last year, but I feel like we've grossly overlooked him this entire offseason when we talk about the running back room because, we got the shiny object of Rocket Sanders. We know what Attaway did when he was at North Texas, but, there's no reason to think that DJ Braswell certainly can't be in the mix for serious playing time as well. Yeah,
and I talked him up a little bit last year. I do think they have... I mean, it's fair to say they've added so much talent to that room that if he emerges in that group, that's saying something. I mentioned this to Chris. This is a complete passing thought. Haven't really heard anything to indicate this, but how about DJ Braswell as a sleeper pick for kickoff return?
Yes.
Okay.
Because Tyler, why are you looking at me like that?
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Okay. Did he do punt returns last year?
No.
No.
Am I thinking? I may have thinking of somebody else.
He did not.
Okay. But yeah, kickoff return that could work.
I have a case.
All right.
So, for
Does this
one,
make your case?
not make a case. It's just a case.
Go.
He quietly is one of the fastest players on the team. And that's been the case since last year. Like we even heard, like going into the season, somebody was like, hey, you know how everybody talks about kind of this group of guys that would be AB, Mary Brown, Nick Harbor, Nick Emanwari, Xavier Leggett. Those are like kind of the freaky guys on last year's teams in terms of speed. And this person was like, guys, Braswell is right there. Like he's right there with them in terms of speed. Also listed at 6 foot, 210 pounds. So is built well to kind of hold up. I think you always need, you don't necessarily need a 6'5", 240-pound kickoff returner like what Harbor would be if he's back there. But you need a little bit more size at kick returner versus punt returner, in my opinion. It's definitely more of a straight line, get up your, kind of build to speed, hit your full speed stride at a certain point as you hope your team is kind of starting to block the coverage team. There's a timing element to it. Punt return is much more of a quick twitch element to it. Excuse me. So, to me, Braswell, if you're looking for a guy on this roster that could handle kickoff return, but also if we're right on, hey, Rocket is 1, Attaway is 2, is Jawan Howell 3, that would give Braswell a role, which could help him be more happy as well. But 2 could allow you kind of not to break into your depth of, oh, we're going to get a starter hit on kickoff returns. I think you're fully willing to play your starters on special teams, but if you have 2 guys that are sort of equally good at doing something, and one of them, oh, this is our lead running back, or this one's going to be a starting wide receiver, but the other guy is not in the rotation, I'm maybe picking the other guy because it gives him something to do and be involved, and everybody wants to have ownership of the team, but also you take out the chance of getting that starter injured.
Well,
are you with me, by the way?
I'm totally with you. But
he was one of the 38 guys that were returning, that were catching kicks and punts.
You counted.
That was a slight exaggeration.
Not that big of a
Here's my question, though. Is it out of the realm of possibility? I know the answer is it's not out of the realm of possibility. I guess to rephrase, how realistic is it? I do think it's going to be very hard to unseat Rocket as number 1. I feel like Oscar Attaway's got a pretty good shot to be like the number 2 back. But could Braswell be 3? Like, could he pass Jawan Howell and Juju McDowell and others like that? I mean, I'm not going to rule it out because Jawan Howell is still a young player as well. And he's big. He can run. He's done some really good things as well. But I'm just curious because as preseason camp goes along, if Braswell makes a move, now can he get some carries at running back? Can he maybe factor in as a kick returner? And now next year when you lose Rocket and Oscar Attaway, although I think Oscar might have another year, if he is done, then you're setting yourself up for having, a couple young guys who have played in Braswell and Howell. Just a question worth pondering.
Or could it be the opposite? Could Howell actually push Attaway
2? Yes.
For 2?
That could also be the case. Or Braswell.
We got a solid bio here for DJ.
Bioscience.
Second-year
Biology.
running back who looks to compete for playing time in a completely revamped, I think that's the word I've been using for the running back room,
Good
too.
one.
Revamped room. Here's the good part. Has top-end speed and is a home run threat with the ball in his hands. That sounds like a kickoff return to me, guys. So we'll see.
You experimented with that on CFB 25 yet?
I have not.
Might be your homework for the night. Let us know how it goes.
Is Braswell in there?
I think so. should be.
I know Juju is not.
Juju is not. We did get to the bottom of that. But I have to check. I'll check on that and get back to you tomorrow. How about that?
Juju's out. Juju is wearing 25 and looking like A.J. Turner
And
with a different name.
Has a name that
That's good.
doesn't exist in college football. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, halftime show with Terry and Michael Espy here on the game.
All right, guys, before we get out of here, let me tell you about our friends over at Firehouse Subs, because every single episode of The Takeover is presented by Firehouse Subs. Luckily, it is lunchtime, so if you're getting hungry, which I know most of you are, there's conveniently a Firehouse Subs near you no matter where you are in the Midlands.